and welcome to the People Power Lunch Hour show here at PhillyCam and on WPPM LP Philadelphia. I'm your host, Vanessa Maria Graber, and on today's show, we're going to be speaking with the members of the Stadium Stompers Coalition, a grassroots North Central Philly organization focused on defeating Temple University's plan to build a 35,000-seat, $126 million football stadium at 15th between Broad and Norris Street. We'll talk to area residents, members of the coalition, to talk about their arguments in opposition to the stadium. Stay tuned for all that and more on this edition of the People Power Lunch Hour Show. People Power Lunch Hour Show is a weekly talk show dedicated to grassroots organizing, social movements, and local organizing. We broadcast live from PhillyCam Center City Studios here at 7th and Ransted on PhillyCam TV and WPPM 106.5 FM. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll have more of a conversation about the Temple Stadium. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the People Power Lunch Hour show here on PhillyCam TV on WPPM 106.5 FM. Today we are going to talk about Temple University's plan to build a 35,000-seat, $126 million football stadium in North Central Philadelphia at 15th between Broad and Norris. We have joined with us in the studio members of the No Stadium, No Deal Coalition, which includes the Stadium Stompers, the Black Clergy of Philadelphia and vicinity, the NAACP, the North Philadelphia Pastors, the Temple Association of University Professionals, National Action Network, the Power Coalition, and the Guardian Civic League. And so this coalition is united in an expanded coalition of groups called the No Stadium, No Deal Coalition, and their 2+ year opposition fight has gained more strength and traction with this strategic alliance. They're here to talk about their alliance, what their demands are, and how they feel their message has been ignored by the university. First up, I'd like to introduce Ruth Birchett. She's a resident of North Central Philadelphia for more than 70 years, a block captain for 30 years. She is a member of the Stadium Stompers and the No Stadium, No Deal Coalition. And she feels as though Temple is ignoring the needs of its residents. She has spoken out at City Council and at many community meetings, and she's here joined with us in the studio to talk about her organizing work. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Vanessa.
So first, I'd like for you to talk about what's been going on before the stadium issue, because Temple has made a number of moves to expand its buildings. Student housing has rapidly increased. And for many people living in that neighborhood, there's been a very real shift in the look of the neighborhood and also how the needs of the residents are addressed. Can you talk about your experience and how the neighborhood has changed?
The neighborhood has changed drastically. My family's been in the neighborhood since 1950, and we are known in North Philadelphia for the beautiful architecture that exists in our community. However, with the expansion of Temple University over the decades, we have seen demolition of those beautiful homes as Temple's footprint has expanded. that kind of expansion has not been to the benefit of the community in any way. It has simply been Temple University's expansion. And it's a great disadvantage. I think it has drastically affected our sense of community, the displacement of residents in a community has really impacted our sense of togetherness, the sense of family and village that we always enjoyed in our community.
And how do you think the university has done? Do you think they've done a good job in working with residents and people in the neighborhood, business owners, members of the faith community, to work together to include them in these plans?
We have found historically that Temple University is very egocentric. As an entity, they more develop ideas and then want to spoon feed them to the community. And in so doing, when they disclose their plans, they generally kind of are very selective about who they want to speak to about their ideas. They always want to speak to people that they believe will immediately say yes, and too often they have tiny offerings to different community people or community groups as bribe to kind of go along with their plans.
Yeah, and I asked you that because I wanted to provide a context for which the stadium is being proposed, because this is one of many things that, is being, trying to be implemented along with, the rapid expansion of student housing, parking garages, more student facilities. There's a long list that came before the stadium.
That's so true. Many of the elders in the community literally have opted to move from the community because of their inability to tolerate the disrespect and aggressive behavior of Temple students who are living in off-campus housing. And so it's really created tremendous tension. The increased policing that comes along with those students being in our community is now not just a 22nd Police District that we have to concern ourselves with in terms of being protected from police maltreatment of citizens, but it's also the Temple Police who are going through our community and stopping people and doing law enforcement, taking law enforcement actions. And one of the biggest problems with that we see, and I'm sure Paula Pebbles of NAM will speak more about this, is how that extra layer of policing over us impacts our community.
Thank you for that description, because I think it's important for our listeners and viewers to know that, this is part of a long history. This isn't an isolated event. Paula Pebbles, you're nodding your head in agreement. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role in all of this, and what's been your experience as this has unfolded over the last 20 or 30 years?
Oh, it's long. Hi, Vanessa. It's longer than that, and thank you for having us today. My family actually have resided in North Philadelphia since the late 1940s, migrating from Savannah, Georgia. And I can tell you for the last 5 decades in my memory, we've constantly had to fight Temple University from encroaching, disrupting the continuity and the serenity of our community. So the stadium is just one more of their efforts to displace particularly the African American community of North Central Philadelphia. It's been one thing after another. There's no limit to what Temple would look to disrupt within our community. We used to think it was only homes. For example, in the case of the former superintendent, Constance Clayton, her family was forced to move out their home to make way for Temple's expansion at Broad and Montgomery. And then most recently with our high school, William Penn, which had an Olympic-sized pool. It was relatively a brand new high school, John Wanamaker Middle School. I can go on and on regarding Temple University's disruption to the continuity of our community, as well as their continued expansion, continuing efforts to expand their footprint into our community. Now it's the stadium, it's the Alpha Center, it's always one thing after another. And what we are saying is enough is enough. If Temple wants to expand, they need to go up into the heavens, not expand into our neighborhoods any further.
So one of the mantras that you've been saying is, in addition to no stadium, no deal, we shall not be moved.
Exactly.
Can you talk more about that?
We shall not be moved means essentially that we will not allow Temple, based on their master plan, which they're always adding to, move the indigenous people, the homeowners, the renters that wish to stay in North Philadelphia to be moved. We will not be moved. We will use all our organizing efforts, collaborating with the alumni as well as professors of Temple University that supports us to make certain that Temple does not move North Philadelphia. Their objective is to create Templetown, and our objective is to assure that North Philadelphia remains for those who want to live there and to purchase there.
So now I want to speak with Reverend Dr. William B. Moore. He's a pastor from the 10th Memorial Baptist Church, and he's also a member of the No Stadium, No Deal Coalition. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, and thank you so much for having us. Yes, I have been pastoring in North Philadelphia for 44 years, and I've seen the transition from it being unsafe for anybody from Temple University to walk 2 blocks north of Broad Street into the neighborhood. And so it's almost like they have awakened after being asleep through a revolution that here's a community with people who live there, who have had businesses there, who've had entertainment there, who've had good schools there, who've had congregations with which they could worship, and parents who sent their children to local schools. And now all of a sudden, Temple is encroaching further and further into the neighborhood, coming up with projects that nobody in the community asked for. The students do not want it. A significant number of the faculty do not want it. The residents do not want it. Many of the political leaders whisper behind the back in deference to, I guess, our elected leader that they do not want it, and they are waiting on our elected leader to say, I do not want it, before they will add their voice to a growing chorus of people who do not want the stadium. The only people who want the stadium are members of the board who will benefit financially through the contracts, and they continue to push forward to, as one of the residents say, to put a whale in a goldfish bowl. It does not fit, and it should not be there. We have not had anyone to come forward. No one has identified anyone that has been as vocal as we have to say, I want the stadium. We're waiting for them to come out the closet, and apparently there's nobody in the closet to come out.
Tell me, how are you organizing people, being a leader from the faith-based community? Are you talking to people outside of your church in the neighborhoods? How are you getting the residents to come together to take action and advocate for themselves?
Well, I think that it is a collective effort. It's not just the pastors. That we do have, their students and many people who are not members of our mosque, our congregations, who are already there. And you really don't have to do a whole lot to organize people. You really have to find a way to address those who are trying to ram it down our throats. people get it because they're the ones who have been pushed from their homes. They're the ones who have given up on living in the community, who've seen the good days and tough days, and now they see what is happening and they don't like it. And so all we have to do is to issue a call to action, and people are there to support the effort.
Thank you. I want to go to now Rodney Muhammad, who is the leader of the Philadelphia NAACP chapter. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
I wanted to talk about the NAACP's position and role in all of this. Typically, the NAACP plays a huge role legislatively and policy making. How are you interfacing with City Council, which seems to be one of the other stakeholders that could potentially stop the building of the stadium?
Well, thank you for your question. One of the things that we're doing, the NAACP came on in 2018. There had already been a 2-year vigil based on the Stadium Stompers and others that have been meeting to try to stop this expansion. The NAACP clearly sees that Temple has gone from partner to predator. The actual residents of North Philadelphia have gone from resident to hostage, live-in hostages now, to Temple's expansionist policies. And what was once a community now has become occupied territory. So we are, we're appealing now to the heart, not necessarily to the collective intellectual strength of City Council, not to their political sagacity, but rather to their heart now, to really look with a heart of sensitivity on the residents of North Philadelphia, a community of people whose dreams are being torn apart, whose living history is being torn apart, their lives are being torn apart, and many of those that are seniors, you have to remember they're living the final chapters of their life. And this is a real horror story going on in North Philadelphia. And when you read about Russell Conwell and how he wanted to be a partner in the community, here's a person that was tutoring people at night to help people. And this is the germ and the genesis of how this whole Temple University got started. And to see what we have now and what it has grown into, and you can see that the Temple clearly is being shepherded by an administration that is unwilling to review its original origin, mission, and purpose. And so North Philadelphians are suffering. And so we're doing everything we can to look at every legal strategy, stopping them at the Planning Commission, stopping them at zoning, stopping them at the Rules Committee, and ultimately, if we have to, try to stop a City Council vote that would be in favor of Temple's expansion, particularly of this stadium. But even the Alpha Center and other initiatives that she comes forward with, they just replace Wanamaker School with all the same promises that were supposed to come there on Cecil B. Moore. They've shifted it now. We call it the bait and switch. They've shifted it now to Diamond Street. But if you go back just a year or two at Bright Hope Baptist Church and that, everything that they're offering at the Alpha Center was supposed to be offered right there on Cecil B. Moore. So we're going to do everything we can to help this coalition to achieve that. Our focus is to stop this stadium. We have larger fights. We understand that. But with $130 million in their pocket, with a chance to float a municipal bond to raise even more millions of dollars, the NAACP can't afford to get distracted. So we're staying focused on City Council that they join us in this coalition to stop Temple University in this effort.
Thank you. Mary Stricker is an associate professor at Temple University, and she's here representing the Temple Association of University Professionals, who are also a member of the No Stadium, No Deal Coalition. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Vanessa.
Well, there's been some You know, there's been some criticism of Temple's communication, especially at these community meetings, having their own community meetings, not being present at the community meetings held by the actual community. You know, being rather silent when it comes to having direct contact with some of the most concerned individuals. What role does the Temple Association of University Professionals play as a liaison, as a intermediary who is sensitive and understanding of the needs of the residents to be heard?
Yeah, so let me just say that while I'm absolutely a member of TAUP, I'm really representing the faculty, because the faculty, all the faculty at Temple, we voted on a resolution that demanded that Temple rescind or retract its proposal for this stadium to the City Planning Commission, and 75% of us faculty supported this resolution. So the faculty is very much against this stadium on campus. And so the role that we are playing in terms of liaison, I wouldn't say we're playing a liaison. I would say that we're more aligning ourselves with the community in asking President Englert and the board exactly what is the evidence that they have talked to anybody in the community and gotten support. We're all still waiting in this room on that information. This nebulous community that Temple is talking about, and they're sending emails out to their students and their alumni to tell people, because I'm also an alumni of Temple, as are some others of us here, that they have spoken to the community, that they've gotten feedback from them. This just simply isn't true. In terms of they've gotten a lot of feedback, but a lot of that feedback, as we know, has been very, very negative. So in trying to hold Temple accountable, we're joining the community in trying to do that, as opposed to being a liaison. President Englert has had several meetings, not meetings they were called, but meetings for the faculty in different colleges and different schools. And this was really for a time for him to present his case on the stadium. And while we were given time for Q&As to ask questions, we weren't getting any information back from him that he was going to respond to us in any substantive way. Instead, he was responding with, "Thank you for your comment, thank you for your question," which I think is essentially what the community's been getting as well. So I don't know that we would be seen as a middleman or middlewoman per se, but more so really coming out very strongly against this so-called deal, which is no deal, and we don't want a stadium on campus.
So they're not telling you anything either as faculty and staff at the university. It doesn't seem that the process is very transparent.
It's absolutely not transparent. We've been told that they don't want to release a lot of the financials because that will compromise the bids that they would get on the stadium. And so they don't want to give us those details. We've asked for those numbers many times and run up against a wall. We've been very clear that we believe this stadium is a bad idea financially, educationally, socially, morally, in all of those ways. And particularly economically, we have been asking them about whether they've tried to negotiate more with the Eagles, whether they've considered Franklin Field, et cetera. And we've gotten little to no answer on that. We're asking them to think outside the stadium as opposed to this idea of why we should or shouldn't have a stadium. We've been presented with the idea that the only way to maintain Temple's viability in the future is through a stadium. We believe this is very, very inaccurate and wrong.
It also centers athletics as opposed to education, right? Which I think is, something for the students to decide. What has been the student reaction to all of this? And actually, I want to give a shout out to our Temple interns who are working hard here today at PhillyCam, who actually suggested this as a show topic, as something that they felt was an important issue that needed to be discussed within the community.
Yeah.
Well, I can say, as a resident of the community who has engaged in many fights with Temple University, at least 5 to my recent memory, that this is the first time that we have Temple students and faculty united with us in fighting this plan to just tower over our community and to spoon feed this monstrosity that is half the size of Lincoln Field to our community, to be built directly across the street from a daycare center, directly across the street from senior and disabled housing, directly across the street from a high school and a food cupboard. It's just totally unreasonable. And over the past 2.5 years, Stadium Stompers has held more than 50 meetings at the Church of the Advocate, at which Temple faculty and students have attended.
And Mary, would you add to that?
Yeah, what I'll say, and this is anecdotal as I don't have statistics on this, but my sense is that, frankly, there's a lot of students who don't even know that this is being proposed, that don't even know that this battle is taking place. I think the alumni know a little bit more about the stadium because Temple has been sending emails to the alumni to present their case. But just Tuesday, so yesterday, I was talking about the stadium in 2 of my classes, and I would say a third, maybe even more of them, were really unfamiliar that there was even a plan to build such a stadium. And so other than the emails from Temple, they're certainly not hearing from the community. And they, frankly, clearly are not that interested in getting a stadium on campus because any information that might have been blown by them in some way, shape, or form, they haven't paid much attention to. This is not the focus of students right now. The focus on students is trying to afford their college education, trying to get themselves positioned in a way that they can achieve their employment success. They are really not invested in helping Temple build a $130 million stadium. They're trying to pay their bills, and they're trying to write their papers and take their exams, et cetera. They are focused on academics. Regardless of whether or not they love football, they're focused on academics.
Minister Muhammad, can you talk about just the wider implications of having universities, these institutions like Penn, Drexel, LaSalle, all of these, big universities seem to be taking more and more land away from people of color in low-income neighborhoods?
Yeah. Well, I say, the way it relates citywide and nationwide is sort of a blessing and a cursing at the same time, because a city like Philadelphia, you have Comcast here, who's one of the leading corporations in the world, but it only has a workforce of 8,000 people. But Temple has 25,000. University of Penn, say 40,000 plus. The largest employers in the city of Philadelphia, the 7 top employers, are all nonprofits. They're these universities. And they may provide jobs, but the price of a job is the loss of a home, the loss of a neighborhood and a community. And I just think that measures like this, because they have the support of the institutions that many of us that are residents of the community don't have the support of. They had the support of the state. They can go down there. They just went down and got $130 million. I can't go get $130 million for community revitalization. They can use the very banks that have been sitting near us that we could never get substantial loans for home improvements and things like that. All of these things bring about financial distress. Developers come in, they're able to increase property values, which makes property taxes go up at a time in people's lives when they're living on fixed incomes. All of this are ingredients and a recipe for massive dislocation of people, transforming neighborhoods to something totally unrecognizable with what we grew up in. If you want to kill a city, just use gentrification, and it transforms. These universities, and I end with this, have failed to homogenize the indigenous population with the academic population. They sit parallel in the same vicinity and space, and it doesn't do good for a city to have its city divided like that with these kinds of institutions. And one other thing, I just found out that if all of these institutions, along with the hospitals in Philadelphia, if they all ordered their copy paper, paper clips, all of these little support materials for office wear, if they ordered it within Philadelphia and this region, it would drop unemployment by 8%. By shopping further out, these purchasing experts shopping further outside of the radius of a Philadelphia region, it's responsible for a lot of the unemployment that continues to rest here, where we have 1 in 4 people living in poverty.
So we're going to take a short break. If you've just been tuning in and watching or listening, this is the People Power Lunch Hour show on Philly Cam TV on WPPM 106.5 FM. We've been speaking with members of the No Stadium, No Deal Coalition, and they are talking about their experience living in North Philadelphia and the challenges that have arisen as Temple University and other universities in Philadelphia continue to expand and gentrify their neighborhoods. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll have more with the coalition, and we'll talk about moving forward and what are some of the other possible solutions to help improve their community and relations with the university. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the People Power Lunch Hour Show. I'm your host, Vanessa Maria Graber. And on today's show, we are talking about the proposed $126 million football stadium being proposed by Temple University to be built at 15th Street between Broad and Norris at North Central Philadelphia. Join with us in the studio. We have members of the No Stadium, No Deal Coalition, and they have been talking to us about their experience as residents, faculty, and other community stakeholders in dealing with this issue and how they can come up with community solutions for gentrification and the expansion of Temple University. I've been speaking with Ruth Birchett, who is one of the leaders of the Stadium Stompers. She's a resident of North Philadelphia for more than 70 years, and she was a former block captain for 30 years. She's also a Temple alum, and she has been very involved in the organizing against this stadium deal, and also joined by Paula Pebbles, who's also a longtime resident, and another Temple alum whose daughters also went to Temple University. They are heavily invested in this issue because they live there and they've seen the changes that have happened in the neighborhood. So welcome back. I wanted to talk about what happens when you win, right? Because you're a determined group of people. If the stadium deal is prevented, then what? I would imagine there are other plans Temple has to expand. It's probably not the last thing that they're going to propose. What does long-term organizing look like? And what are some of the other ways that you can, continue organizing to prevent, the destruction of your neighborhoods and further gentrification?
With regard to Temple University itself, ideally it would be wonderful to change the way that Temple University interacts and behaves toward our community. That would be ideal. Temple University tends to be one of the poverty pimps, if you will, that utilizes the miserable statistics that we live under every single day in our community, whether it's crime or unemployment or incarceration or welfare dependency or whatever. People use these statistics to get funding for all kinds of programs and then spoon feed remedies to these social solutions to our community. And more often than not, the remedies don't work. And so they get funded for these things and still we're left none the better. A prime example of it is Temple University years ago became the educational management organization for several of our local grade schools that were failing. And so they were supposed to be a turnaround for these schools. Well, after 5 years of sucking up all the money, Temple got a failing grade itself. And our children's educational potential was lessened even more by an institute of higher education. And so we want a moratorium on Temple University applying for grants to provide services to our community because they have not risen to a level of competency that is beneficial to us.
Paula, would you like to add to that? What would you like to see in the long term?
Yes, I would add to what Ruth just indicated regarding a moratorium, but I would suggest that Temple be more forward-thinking and actually, for once in its existence, come clean and straightforward with the community. What do I mean? What I'm saying essentially is that Temple would openly and honestly provide their master plan of ideas to the community and actually honestly look for, seek input from the community regarding their vision for 2020, 2025, et cetera, as it relates to North Philadelphia, because we're not going anywhere. And if they want to continue to be a thriving institution that often will not have to deal with the constraints of the residents opposing them, then they should come forward with clean hands and say to the North Philadelphia community, this is what we're proposing over the next 5, 10, 15 years. What do you think about our ideas? How can we get along as good neighbors based on our vision? Now, I know I'm being really optimistic by saying this. They have no intention of doing that. Their intentions, essentially, for Temple University is to continue to be arrogant, self-serving, not considering what's important to the residents, the indigenous residents of North Philadelphia, not even their own students, because in their mind, it's stadium over education. Clearly, Ruth just provided us an example of the educational management. I mean, that is shameful. I graduated from the College of Education for a school that's supposed to promote higher education to come back relatively with an F in relationship to managing elementary level schools in North Philadelphia. Shame on Temple. So what they can honestly do is to come forward and say they would like to sit down with a round table of community stakeholders, residents, people that worship there, ministers. This is a holistic approach to our community, and say, okay, we're going to reveal to you our master plan, and we like some feedback, some constructive feedback from you. In addition to that, they need to realize the stadium will not be built in North Philadelphia. They need to consider, as it was indicated by one of my colleagues earlier, renegotiating with the Eagles or relocating to another one of their campuses. But it will not work, will not be built in North Philadelphia.
Reverend Dr. Moore, what is your vision for the future in terms of long-term organizing and meeting the needs of your constituency?
I think, embedded in our DNA is that power conceives nothing without a struggle. So we realize this. It's a part of us, and so we're not going to give up. I'm sure that coming forth from this is Temple will learn that you cannot deal with the community as you have dealt with it, and that is to cherry-pick people, invite them to the Diamond Club for a meal as though people are hungry. It's much bigger than that. We're fighting for the respect of our community and the unneedful dislocation of our people. Right. This is a new revolution, and people are not going to kowtow to people who have old ideas of how you deal with the community of the past, that you cannot give them $1,000 for their nonprofit, think they're going to be satisfied, and you can put up a shiny new building, you can do a land deal, and move forward, and everything is well. Those days are over. We see that with the students across the country who are advocating for a change and moving the needle on gun rights. We've seen it in Philadelphia, where 2 African-American men were arrested for sitting while black, and that necessitated the owner of Starbucks to come and sit with the community. I think he set a model for how you deal with the community. Temple University has to learn that. Now, it may be that yes, it is. The president, the chair of the board, and the board, their day is over. The community has outgrown the leadership. And if the university is going to survive, then they have to learn that Temple University is not North Philadelphia. They are in North Philadelphia, and we're going to have to learn to survive. The community will survive. The question is whether Temple University wants to survive. That's really the bigger question. The students have recognized that. They want a new world, a world that includes everybody at the table. The faculty wants a new world where everybody's at the table. The residents want that. The question is, will you look in the mirror and do you want that? The fact of the matter is you are pursuing something that is not profitable. Out of the some 27 schools that have really good programs, probably 4 of them are economically viable. Stadiums are not economically viable. They do not provide an economic ladder for people to climb and invest to be able to raise their families. So that Temple University has to learn this. So whatever we need to do, we're going to do, including right into the bond market to say that this is not a good investment to invest in. You can invest in it, but we're not assuring you that it's going to be profitable because it's not. And engaging in the community is inviting African Americans to speak and giving them honorary degrees and putting circulars in African American papers is not a substitute for engaging in the community. I understand that they have moved the May board meeting to the Ambler campus. Well, you can run, but you're not going to hide. There has to be some conversations with the community. We're not going to go away. And I think the sooner we've learned that lesson, we know we're not going to go away. Temple University has to learn that lesson for their own survival. So take this $140 million that you're going to go and invest in professors, invest in getting them on a tenured track so that we know that you have a stable teaching force, a faculty force that's going to be there, and that what they've invested in to get an education will be rewarded by a good salary and not a meager salary where they don't get benefits, and that the students don't have to walk down the aisle and when they throw the tassel on the other side, that they're turning it to the side of poverty, that they're not going to walk out with a mountain of debt. Invest that in scholarships. Invest that in what you were designed to do. You are not developers. We know that you do have to have builders, but you are not developers, and shiny new builders do not build community in a community. So that we do see, I think, a new configuration of how the university engages with the community.
Thank you. That was Reverend Dr. William B. Moore. He's a pastor at the 10th Memorial Baptist Church and also part of the No Stadium, No Deal Coalition. If you're just tuning in to Philly Cam TV on WPPM 106.5 FM, we've been talking about Temple University's proposed plan to build a 35,000-seat, $126 million football stadium in north central Philadelphia. Professor Stricker, Temple can't be all that bad, or, you probably wouldn't be there. What are some of the things Temple does well, or what are the areas they think they should stick to and focus in on? We've had other members of the staff and faculty on this station, and there are some things that they're doing well, and individual departments and programs. Some of them do have some real community focused efforts. Can you talk about something positive that they're doing that could be like a model for them in terms of how they interact with the community?
Temple does a lot of positive things, for sure. And education is the best thing that we do, and that's our main function, is to educate students and prepare them for the world out there so that they don't, as Reverend Moore said, end up in poverty when they get out of school. Temple is sometimes called Diversity University. It's debatable whether that's who we are anymore or not, but it's certainly a very diverse student populace. And I think that Temple does a very good job of integrating those students in a way both socially and academically that allows them to move forward into an increasingly diverse world and be successful in those worlds. We get a lot of students that are from very homogeneous populations, both students of color and white students, who, when they're put into this environment that's very diverse, it's new, it's difficult, it's also exciting for many of them. And I think Temple does a pretty good job of preparing them for the world that will be the one that is most familiar to them when they leave school. So I think Temple does a great job on that. In terms of organizing in future in Temple, I think that I just want to build on what the other speakers and coalition members have said, in that I think that for Temple, we do really need to be taking about 10 steps back and thinking about ourselves as neighbors in this community. And it's frankly, it's heartbreaking to hear sometimes the things that Temple is offering only so they can get their stadium. And so particularly, for example, like the Amos Community Center, you know, this is an after-school program, a community center for kids, for adults, et cetera, that could use a bucket load of work like all community centers in Philadelphia could. And but I don't, and maybe somebody here could tell me differently, I don't know that Temple has offered in the past to invest in that center, which could really, really use their investment. And yet now Temple is saying, oh, they're going to pour some money into Amos and make it look good. And, you know, it's things like that that, you know, makes everyone, including myself, very suspect of Temple's motives. And it makes me think about my kids when I tell them, you know, what I need from you is I need you to hug me because you love me. Don't hug me because you want something from me, because I'm going to, you know that that's what's going on. Give me the hug when you don't want anything. And I think that's what Temple needs to do. Temple needs to hug their neighbors, hug their community, even when we don't want anything.
Thank you. I'm going to give Minister Rodney Muhammad from the NAACP the last word as we close out our show. You know, this isn't just an issue for the residents of North Philadelphia, right? This is a city-wide issue. Part of the reason why we do the show is to help people understand the issues and make them care about it, get involved, take action. Why is this an issue that everybody should care about in Philadelphia?
Well, because it involves all of us. Thank you for that. And just to build on what everyone has said, in 1,000 years, I couldn't have said it better than they said it. But this is a protracted war that we did not declare. And the stadium thing is just one battle in that. We need this victory to wake the troops up again. Yes. We've been nodding on this. Forbes magazine just showed that black and brown people inside of 2 decades will be broke. High levels of wealth inequality and income inequality since 2007 have devastated our communities. So one of the things that we will be doing specifically, the NAACP, working with Bright Hope Baptist Church, we're bringing in people who know how to restructure home loans without people having to go in their pocket, to try our best to make these mortgages that people have now, their existing mortgages, more affordable in light of skyrocketing property taxes. We're bringing in a host of nonprofit organizations that specialize in counseling people in housing because we're fighting for space now. And if we can stay in the spaces we have, you won't be able to move other folk in there. But you can move others in there if we feel we have to move out because we're financially distressed. And we just have to sit down now, in my judgment, and really plan for protracted struggle. The stadium is just one battle in it. And I was looking for it before I came, a large booklet that Brother Ken Tu gave me before his passing that promised to bring $500 million community revitalization investment in North Philadelphia during the Rizzo administration. And that money was, the flow of that money was irrigated to some other project. It never reached North Philadelphia. And these protracted years of campaigns of disinvestment, that's what leaves our communities in blight, that makes Temple look like the cavalry that's coming in to rescue us from ourselves. So I'll leave it at that, but I thank God for this coalition. I've worked in many coalitions, but this by far has been better for me because we got a target. We know where we're going. We know what victory looks like, and we know what failure looks like in this campaign. So I thank God for all of them, and thank you for having us.
And Ruth, I just want you to be able to invite our listeners and viewers to the march that you are going to have on May 1st. If you could, we always love to end our show with an invitation. If you could tell us how they can connect with you and join the march.
Sure. The Stadium Stompers is leading a march on May 1st, and we will be stepping off from Sullivan Hall at Temple University. That's right near Broad and Berks, and we will be advancing down Broad Street to Broad and Girard, and there we will encounter speakers who will be talking about the daycare effort that Temple is attempting to do. And then we'll be moving forward to the School District of Philadelphia, and there we'll talk about certainly our children's education and gentrification, and we will end at City Hall in front of the O.V. Cato statue there. The step off is from Temple campus at 3:30 on May 1st. You can sign up with us on Facebook, find us on Facebook, as well as Stadium Stompers. And then you can also find information about this on the No Stadium, No Deal website as well, nostadiumnodeal.com and nostadiumnodeal@gmail.com. As well. So we're looking forward to it. And we also just have to state, and we will have vehicles as well along the route. So if you don't feel that, feisty enough to march all the way from Temple University to City Hall, you can ride in the vehicles that are going to be provided by the coalition as well. And we really don't want to leave out the fact that we understand that the behavior of Temple University has a lot to do with their the privilege that they have enjoyed by elected representatives. And so we're putting our elected officials on notice as well that Temple has to change its behavior, and so do you if you want to continue to represent us.
All right. I want to thank all of my guests for speaking with us today and for all of the organizing that you're engaged in. You just heard Ruth Birchett, who is one of the leaders of the Stadium Stomper group. We also heard from Paula Pebbles, who is another member, longtime resident of North Philadelphia. I want to thank the Reverend Dr. William B. Moore, pastor of the 10th Memorial Baptist Church, and Minister Rodney Muhammad, who is the chapter leader of the NAACP. You can find this episode and all of our episodes of the People Power Lunch Hour show at phillycam.org and on our YouTube channel. I want to thank everybody for speaking, and to all of our viewers and listeners out there, thank you so much. If you like what you hear and you support this type of grassroots non-commercial programming on the airwaves, please consider making a donation to our WPPM on-air fund drive at phillycam.org. Each week, we are here in the studio on the People Power Lunch Hour, featuring the voices from the ground of local organizing, grassroots efforts, and social movements. We started this show because there are lots of intelligent, smart, compassionate people in Philadelphia working on these difficult issues who have real, viable solutions for moving forward. Thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll be back next week. I'm Vanessa Maria Graber.